To protect my privacy, I will keep my name anonymous. I am not sure how to begin my story, but I'll do the best I can. I guess I'll start by informing you about the Blues Clues show. For those of you who have never watched it, Blues Clues is a show for young children that was created in 1996. It lasted for 10 years with a total of 6 seasons and 142 episodes. The show involves Steve or Joe looking for clues and solving mysteries with the help of the audience. Blue was an animated dog that was labeled the clues with her paw prints. Blue's Clues was a hit by many little kids, including me. The idea was original and the artwork was amazing. However, Steve Burns was the backbone of the show. Steve Burns was the actor who plays Steve. He was more serious than Barney the dinosaur, but he loved kids and knew exactly how to make them happy. There was just something magical about his enthusiasm that made me want to watch more and more of his episodes. The saddest part of my childhood was when Steve left the show in 2002 and pursued a musical career. Steve was replaced by Donovan Patton, who is the actor for Joe, but it wasn't just the same. I stopped watching Blue's Clues after Steve left. It just lost its magic. Joe was nothing like Steve. He was a total goofball, and my mother always told me that Donovan Patton was acting too hard. When I turned 16, my family and I moved to a large three-story house in New York that was previously owned by a nice old lady. A few weeks after moving in, I decided to do some exploring in the attic, and I found an old trunk. To my surprise, it was filled with a bunch of old VHS tapes. All of them were Blue's Clues tapes. I knew the old lady's cell phone number, so I decided to give her a call and ask her about the tapes. She told me that she had bought them from a collector a few years back for her little grandson to watch. After I thanked her and hung up, I emptied the trunk and checked the tapes. All of them had the episodes I have already watched except for one. The one tape I had just found was a regular sticker, not the factory sticker like the other tapes had, but the title on the sticker was Blue's Clues Sorrow. I thought that it was a little strange, but I figured that maybe it was a copy of the Steve Goes to College episode. You know, the one where Steve goes off to college and Joe takes his place, because Steve said goodbye to all of his friends in that episode. I considered it to be very sorrowful indeed. When my parents went on their anniversary trip, they left me in charge of the house. One night I figured it would be a perfect opportunity to check out the tape. Our TV has a VCR, and I have to admit I felt a tingle of excitement when I placed the tape into the player. I was about to relive my childhood memories of watching Blue's Clues. I didn't care if I was too old to watch it. I knew for sure that I would enjoy it. At least that's what I thought. The episode started off completely normal. The Blue's Clues book opened up, and Steve looked outside the window of his yellow house. "Hey out there, it's me, Steve. Have you seen Blue? Wait, she's not here. Well, come on in." The front door opened, and Steve was in the living room, looking concerned. "I need to tell you something important. Blue is at the pet hospital. She is having an operation on her heart. I hope she's okay." Steve stopped talking and looked down at the floor. The scene ended. The next scene shows Steve at the pet hospital. He sat in the in the waiting room without making a sound. He did nothing else but stare at the doors that led to the operating rooms. A surgeon had opened the door, but she wasn't an animation. She was a real person. She whispered something in Steve's ear, but I could hear everything she was saying. Her heart stopped beating. We tried our best, but we couldn't get it to beat again. "I'm sorry." The scene ended. The next scene had a title card saying that a month has passed after Blue's funeral. A deep voice spoke. "There are 5 stages in the grieving process: denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance." The voice said, "Steve will experience 3 stages all at once: depression, anger, and mental illness." Steve was in his bedroom, lying in his bed. He began to cry, and the color of the episode turned black and white, like a depressing old photograph. He cried so hard, and his breathing grew shallow. The scene ended. The next scene then showed Steve up on his bed. He stopped crying, but his face was red, and his teeth were clenching tightly. In his hands he had a stuffed anteater Horace. He screamed, "Blue!" at the top of his lungs. His scream sent chills down my spine. Steve ripped off Horace's head, and black ooze squirted out from the stuffed animal's neck. Steve threw Horace out of a fit of rage. When the anteater landed, The ooze had completely covered the floor. I fought the urge to vomit. Against my better judgment, I decided to keep watching. Steve's body began to turn darker and darker color by the second. After about 5 seconds, Steve turned completely black. He got out from his bed, walked to his bedroom, and walked into the living room. I thought he was going to sit in his big red thinking chair, but he didn't. He stood in front of the chair and stared at the screen for a full minute. His eyes lost their pupils and became nothing more than white dots. He started crying again, and white tears streamed down his face. Some sad piano music began to play, and the music was so heartbreaking. I shed a few tears myself. A message then flashed on the screen. You can figure out Blue's Clues, but you can't figure out insanity. The scene then ended. The next scene then showed Steve still standing in the living room. He was no longer crying, and his body was a complete normal color. I can't live without Blue, he said. She was my best friend. She gave my life happiness and meaning. Without her, I have nothing to live for. The kids in the back room that helped Steve find the clues began to cry and whimper, and they shouted, "Don't do this, Steve! We love you! We're your friends too!" "I'm sorry," Steve said. "I'm sorry if I break your hearts for doing this, but I have no choice. Goodbye." He held up a container, and the camera zoomed in on the label, which said potassium cyanide. Steve took a calm look on his face as he swallowed the contents of the container. He instantly collapsed and foamed at the mouth. His body twitched and thrashed on the floor, like if he was being electrocuted. He eventually stopped moving, and I knew that he was deceased. The episode finally ended just as the TV turned to static. I sat still dazed. It took my brain a few minutes to comprehend what I just watched. I made a decision then and there, decided to play detective and find out where in the world this episode had came from. I looked up the episode name online, but it came up with nothing. I knew the company Viacom owned Blue's Clues because their company name was shown on the factory sticker of each and every VHS tapes. After a bit of research, I wrote a letter to the Viacom headquarters. I told them about my experience and asked them if they knew where the tape came from. 2 weeks later, I got a reply in the mail. "Dear Mister, thank you so much for taking the time to write to us. We are quite surprised about your story about the unaired episode of Blue's Clues you discovered. We are grateful to ensure that you contact us concerning it. We can personally assure you that Viacom Media Networks, as well as Viacom, claims no ownership or liability whatsoever regarding the episode. However, we still feel that the explanation is in order. Unfortunately, we are unable to provide details of the tape's creation, as we simply do not know how this happened. Back in 2002, we received a VHS in a tape in the package with the no return address. The words Mr. Ted were written on the package. Along with the tape, there was a letter from Mr. Ted stating that he was a biggest fan of Blue's Clues series, and he asked for our approval for his fan-made creation on the television. We were quite flattered that a fan would send us a fan-made episode for airing. However, when our editors viewed the episode for refinement, they were quite appalled by its nature. A few of the staff who viewed the episode unbelievably went into shock and had to be transported to the emergency room immediately. Due to the horrifying content, we had absolutely had no plans to air this episode. We passed the tape to the private collector, but we were all dismayed to discover what he had or many copies he made. We ask that you please do not release the contents of the tape or this letter to the public, as we don't want to upset our viewers and who love and support our shows for young children. With warm regards, Michael D. Fricalas, Executive Vice President, General Counsel, and Secretary. Questions bounce inside my head, and they still do to this day. Who is Mr. Ted? How was he able to create such a demonic episode? Is he even, human? Out of respect for Viacom, I'm afraid I cannot provide any footage. However, I figured releasing a single screenshot and a copy to the letter to the public won't make them too angry. You're probably wondering, why are you telling me this? What's the point of this story? To be honest, I just want to get it off my chest. I've kept this a secret for a little while, but I eventually felt the desire to tell someone, whatever they believe me or not. A part of my brain told me to throw the tape away and the letter, but I have kept them both in my closet to remind me of what I experienced was real. I now then realize that the so-called fans of the TV shows are not as normal as you may think. They are.